Okay, so today we are looking at Of Mice and Men, Chapter 2. So in Chapter 2, we get introduced to all the main characters in the novel. Um, so we're past the exposition now, sort of getting into more of the rising action as we start to see some of the major sort of troubles that could lie ahead for Lenny and George. So, if we're looking at our questions, three phrases which describe this chapter, well, you're going to come up with those on your own at the end. Items in George's bindle. So, early on, it brings up some items. So, for instance, it talks about the razor and a bar of soap. Now, there are other items that you are going to have to list. You find the other items. So we're not just giving you the full answer on this. But what does this tell you about the owner? Well, so you want to think about it. Razor and a bar of soap tells you that he is clean. Um, so you just look at whatever it is and then you come up with an adjective. Evidence of racism. By now, you've probably met, if you read chapter 2, a character by the name of Brooks. All right. And what you want to do is look for examples of how they are racist to him. And you can think of language and actions. All right. Now,
give direct quotes from the book.
No, it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Okay.
Now, guys, if you write the N word, you should not write the word out. You should just put the N word, even though it's written out in the book. Then you're going to look closer at Candy. So Candy is the old swamper. All right. He has been there a long time, obviously. And you're going to write down some comments on his personality. Now, if we think about the dog, usually in class we would look at the symbolism of the dog, because the dog it's old, right? It stinks. The dog is sort of has to be cared for, etc. Not very liked by the other people. So what you want to think of, are any of these similarities, do they match Candy? And comments on his personality. So as you read, write some things about him. And notice Candy does have a disability because Candy only has one arm. And notice this is, what do we learn about Candy from this? The old swamper looked quickly at him and then shuffled to the door, rubbing his whiskers with his knuckles as he went. Them guys just come, he said, and shuffled past the boss and out the door. So, what character trait does this show us about Candy? Right? So it definitely, where he shuffles, what does that show us? How would you describe him based off of that? Also, since he has whiskers, for instance, that shows us that he's older. So if we look at that part, then I also want you to think about his response. What does that show about him? Then down here, who's your favorite so far? You just pick which character is your favorite. Now, strengths and weaknesses. So it says character symbols or acts in chapter 2 which show strength or weakness. So you just fill those in, those examples. Who do you think is stronger? Who do you think is weaker? Napoleon complex. We said when someone is small, so they act tough, also known as little man syndrome. So which character displays evidence of this and how? That will be very obvious. There's one character who's smaller and then sort of has to act tougher than he is. So I will tell you the character. It's definitely Curly. Okay. So now you explain how he shows that. Curly is one of the big threats of this chapter, right? The other big threat, of course, is Curly's wife. So you're going to look at, how does Lenny react to her? How does George react to her? Now, you definitely want to write these down. So we have some slang terms in this chapter. At one point, it says she got the eye. I saw her giving Slim the eye, etc., etc. So she does literally have eyeballs, but it also means something else. It means she is extremely flirtatious. All right. Take a sock at you means try to punch you. It doesn't mean they're going to bring socks that you wear on your feet. Get the can. You've probably heard that one before. That means to be fired. And then slang her pups. So that's talking about the dog. So that means give birth to her puppies. So the dog, not Candy's dog, but there's a different dog that just had puppies. Words the men use to describe Curly's wife. Let's write those out and talk about those for a second. So they call her a tart, which back in the day, that's like nowadays people would call that person they would say probably a hoe or something like that. A tramp, they call her gel, bait, rat trap, and they call her the B word. Notice, guys, that these 5 terms are not necessarily the nicest ways. So all of these indicate sexism, right? Because as we'll see time and time again, they're sexist towards Curly's wife. They are ableist towards Lenny and his ability. They are ageist towards Candy based on his age, and they're racist towards Crooks. So the 4 isms that were big back then. So Curly's view of his wife, think about how he treats her. On this one, in your opinion, so this is your opinion, you click the ones that you think apply, and then you state your reasoning for choosing those. Then draw a symbol to represent this chapter. That's up to you. You can just draw whatever you would like. And Curly's wife is never called by her name. What effect does this have? Again, so they just call her, we don't even know her name, right? It's sort of like in Night, how they would call them by a number instead of their name. So it dehumanizes her, and it again reinforces the sexism at that time. Women really were treated negatively. So that's all you got to do for this chapter. And then, of course, the exit slip is on the daily agenda log. So are there any questions about that? Well, I guess you all can't ask questions. Miss Terrell, Miss Carrico, Miss Bernardo, you all have anything to add about chapter 2?
No, I think it really introduces Curly's wife and describes her very well in that chapter, and how they feel towards her, how she's perceived in where she is.
All righty. So that is chapter 2.